Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So I'm going to give it a few seconds for this to toll. I'll repeat hello, everyone, a couple times just so the live stream catches it. Greetings, everyone. We see there's people joining on with their audio. Welcome, welcome. It's a beautiful Sunday just after Nowruz. It's 180 Badi. It's 180 years after the start of the Badi calendar. We just celebrated Nowruz, the beginning of the new year. We're so happy to start off our first session after New Year's with Mr. Steve Sarowitz. We welcome all of you who are joining us and all of you who are on YouTube and Facebook. Welcome. We are having Mr. Steve Sarowitz, who is an accomplished executive producer of the film The Gate and the founder and chairman of the board of Paylocity. He has a passion for the film industry, co-producing the film Abdul Baha in France through his media production company, Spring Green Films. Steve is also a committed philanthropist who actively supports various causes related to education, healthcare, and poverty reduction. Overall, his success in business, film, and philanthropy makes him a role model for many. And you can also, if you're in the Highlands Park area, in the Chicago area of the USA, you can actually go to Wayfarer Theaters. They just opened their doors and they have amazing movies you can go watch, positive content that he's putting out there that you should definitely take a look at. Now, this week's topic is keeping the faith in uncertain times. In times of uncertainty and turmoil, it can be challenging to maintain one's faith and stay grounded in one's belief. This can be especially true for people who hold strong spiritual beliefs, as they may feel particularly vulnerable when faced with circumstances that challenge their worldview. One way to keep the faith during uncertain times is to focus on the core principles of one's beliefs. For Baha'is, this might include concepts such as the oneness of humanity, the importance of justice and unity, and the role of individual responsibility in building a better world. By focusing on these principles, Baha'is can find strength and inspiration, even in the face of adversity. Another strategy for keeping the faith is to find support and community. This can be particularly important for Baha'is, who place a strong emphasis on the importance of fellowship and communal worship. Even if physical gatherings are not possible, Baha'is can still connect with one another through virtual meetings, such as this one, online discussions, and other forms of digital communication. It can also be helpful to practice mindfulness and gratitude. By taking time to reflect on the blessings in one's life, Baha'is can cultivate a sense of gratitude and appreciation, even in the midst of difficult circumstances. Similarly, by practicing mindfulness and being fully present at the moment, Baha'is can find a sense of peace and calm that can help them weather the storms of uncertainty. Finally, it's important to remember that uncertainty, it's a natural part of life, and that challenges and difficulties can ultimately lead to growth and transformation. By embracing the uncertainty and learning to navigate it with grace and resilience, Baha'is can deepen their faith and strengthen their connection to their spiritual beliefs. Thank you, Steve, for joining us. Everyone, thank you for joining as we are going to start this session with Steve Sarowitz. Please, Steve, take it on from here.
Thank you, John. So let's talk about this uncertainty, like these uncertain times. What is it that you see? We read the newspapers every day. We read about wars. We read about the Russia-Ukraine war. We read about the failure a week and a half, 2 weeks ago of the banks, of the Silicon Valley Bank. We read about economic uncertainty. We read about depression and drug abuse and alcoholism, all these things that are affecting our society. We get a lot of negative political things, very partisan politics. You know, people are families are being divided. People are very angry about this or that. this issue or that issue. I know you're in Florida. I know Florida has a lot of headlines right now. Some people are very angry at the Florida government. Some people love the Florida government. It doesn't really matter. What we're doing is we're concerning ourselves with things that aren't that important. The primary thing we need to remember, pardon me, take a drink of water, is that we're spiritual beings. We're spiritual beings.
Florida breeze, the humidity from Florida coming your way.
We're spiritual beings, primarily. The material body is secondary. And so the things that we're thinking about, all these material things, are distracting us from what's really important. You know, when we talk about partisan politics, we get in the anger. It's almost like getting down in the mud in a mud wrestling match. And it's all focused on hating your opponent and hating everything about them. And really, it's divisive at its very core, its very root. And the whole thing that we need to work for as a human race is unity. And we can't work for unity if we're looking at material things. Material things divide us, whether it be race or religion. Now, religion, I'll talk about a little bit more as whether it's material or spiritual, whether it be our country, whether it be our gender, whether it be our political ideologies. All of this division is apparently tearing the world apart. I come from a Jewish background. I live in an area that has a lot of Jews. And recently we had some terrible anti-Semitic flyers being passed around. We've actually had it a couple times in the last couple of years. This anti-Semitism is one of those dividers. There's Islamophobia. There's all sorts of, there's terrible prejudice against Baha'is in Iran. There's the religious prejudice, and the religion as a divisive force is the material side of religion. It's not the spiritual side of religion. The material side of religion is, what is my religion? It's this name, and I'm attached to this name or this prophet, and everyone else is wrong. That's the material side of religion. That has nothing to do with the actual teachings of Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha or Baha'u'llah or any of the messengers of God. Every one of them focused their teachings on the love of humanity, universal love of humanity. When we think about nationalism, you know, I'm an American citizen and everyone else is inferior. Or I'm in, you know, this country is better or that country. And that's kind of when you really take a step above the world and you look at it, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to have a worldview that imagines that one country is better than another. When we think of ourselves as all of God's children, how could God possibly favor the followers of one nation or the followers of one religion or the residents of one nation over each other? The same goes for race. Race is just a coincidence of climate, yet in this country, in the United States, for hundreds of years, some of us, and I say us, because all of us are us, some of us have been treated as less than because of the color of our skin. How could that possibly be? How could we understand ourselves as being God's children and treat any of our brothers and sisters as less than? That's impossible. It's all of the material things that we're divided, that we're covering ourselves with, that we're focusing on. That's what's dragging us down. And it appears when you focus on these material things that the world is in a world of hurt. And there's no question that it is, if you look at only the material side of things. You know, the fact that we have all these prejudices, the fact that we have economic challenges, the fact that we have political challenges. All of our systems appear to be crumbling. Our educational system. I have a friend who's a fourth grade teacher, and she had a student give her a middle finger and then throw his iPad at her. And this was someone she'd known all his life. And she says, these types of things are happening in class all the time. I know I have two children who are in college. At college, they cannot get enough mental health resources. If you want mental health resources and you're a student in college now, you have to wait sometimes a couple months to get someone to see you. It's a crisis. drugs and alcohol. Unfortunately, my son had a friend who recently overdosed, and I was hopping on the plane. As I was getting on the plane with my family to go see my son, I heard about another friend whose son just overdosed. And then that same week, my daughter's sorority, they were on a train going to Chicago from Evanston, Illinois, and they saw someone overdose right in front of them. Drug overdoses are an epidemic right now in America. Drug abuse, alcohol abuse. Why? Well, we have a spiritual problem. So all of this, the economic problems, the problems with our educational systems, the problem with all of our systems, our economic systems, have to do with spiritual. The root cause is spiritual, and the root solution is spiritual. What is the spiritual solution? Well, first of all, to acknowledge that it is a spiritual solution and a spiritual problem. I'm also a philanthropist. I have a family foundation, Julie and Grace, and then I have a Baha'i inspired foundation, which is part of our movie company, Wayfair. We have Wayfair Studios, and then Wayfair Foundation is really our foundation side to take the Baha'i ideals and take them all over the world and practically put them in place for philanthropy. And the issue is that the problems are spiritual in nature. When we look at solely the material version of ourselves and others, we see our skin color, we see our nationality, we see the religion we were raised. We see our political ideas. We see the differences amongst ourselves. I think about this way, you think about this way. When we look at ourselves instead as souls having a human experience, we see the unity. We're united as one soul. We're united as children of a single God. It is that failure to do that that is the root cause of all of humanity's problems. The Baha'i faith says that there's two apparently opposing forces going on right now in the world. The one force is the disintegration of these systems, these older systems that are woefully ill-prepared to handle the modern world. And they are crumbling very quickly right now. It's accelerating. The disintegration, apparently, of all of humanity's systems is accelerating greatly. But simultaneously, and this is what a lot of people miss, is this acceleration, and it's together because these two processes are inextricably linked. This disintegration is linked with the acceleration of the creation of a new civilization, a great new civilization. The old civilization is based on greed, division, corruption, superstition, in the place of what should be true religion. It goes against logic and reason and science. The old systems are failing. The new systems are based on love and kindness and cooperation. True spirituality, unity, all of the spiritual virtues that every prophet is taught are in this new civilization. This old civilization that's ignored really these teachings is dying, and it needs to die. And so I know a lot of people see this and they're very scared because things are falling down, but the old tree has to fall down so the new one can grow. I've heard, and in the South in particular, I've heard this many times. Oh my God, there's a new world order coming. And in that new world order, and then the next few words are typically, we're going to be, the Antichrist is going to come and they're going to take over the world. And I always tell people the same thing. I said, I'm very, very, very scared about the new world order. It's, and I describe it, nuclear armed countries that don't like each other, greed, corruption, superstition, worn out tradition. Wait. Sorry, that's the old world order. That's what we're living in today. And that is pretty scary. But the new world order, according to the Bible, because the people who are usually telling me this are Christians, I say the new world order is right in the Bible. The new world order is described in the Bible. And the new world order is love and kindness. It's 1,000 years of peace. It's described in Revelation. The new world order is actually doing what Christ told us to do 2,000 years ago and really implementing on an unprecedented global scale. And that, I'm very excited to say, is what we're doing today. The Baha'is are doing this all over the world. We're followers of Baha'u'llah, the return of Christ. And we're implementing his vision for a unified world. And of course, this is what the Bible's talking about over and over again. They asked Jesus, when's this going to happen? He says, at the end of the age, which implies that a great new age is going to follow. And that says in the Bible, it says in Revelation, the 21st chapter of Revelation, the new Jerusalem is going to come down. And this is a glorious thing. And the new Jerusalem will be lit, it says, by Baha'u'llah, twice in that chapter. The glory of God. The new Jerusalem will be lit by the glory of God, Baha'u'llah. So let us all work together to build this new Jerusalem, to build this new paradise on earth. And this paradise on earth is not something so far off we can't build it. We can build it today. We can build it by staying out of partisan politics and all of the division that the world wants us to see. We can build it by bringing positive things in books, in media, bringing positive influences. We can build it by raising our children with the core values in every religion, love and kindness and mercy and compassion, what Baha'is would call Baha'i children's classes, teaching generosity and unity and oneness of humanity at a very young age. Junior youth classes that we have as Baha'is that teach our children in teenage years service. I guarantee you, if our children were busy with service projects, they wouldn't be busy with drugs and alcohol and other things to numb the pain. Has anyone ever asked, why are so many young people numbing themselves to reality? That's what the alcohol and the drugs do. Why? What's so painful? You're in the prime of your life at this young age. Yes, the world is scary, but the world is beautiful. In the film The Matrix, in the original film The Matrix, Keanu Reeves is in a computer simulated world, computer generated reality, and that's heaven. And hell is the actual reality in the film The Matrix. If anyone, most of you have probably watched that film. In the actual reality, human beings are sitting there giving their energy to machines. Machines are running the world, and that reality is hell. So in the Matrix, the false reality created by machines is heaven, and the true reality is hell. I would argue that the real reality is the exact opposite of that. So in my view of the world, the true reality is this false reality that we've created. We've created a reality that says that the world is a terrible place. We've created a reality, our own reality, that says the world is falling apart around us. And it is, but these are the fake realities that we've created that's falling apart. It's this illusion of separation that we've created that's failing right now. But what the true reality is the inner meaning, this inner spirituality, this love and kindness and mercy and compassion. This beautiful spiritual reality is the true reality. And we need to lean into that now more than ever. We need to ignore the negative headlines. We need to ignore the negative media. I mean, look at the movies that Hollywood's making right now. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, Cocaine Bear. So many horror movies, slasher movies. Why? Because these are people making these movies who don't have a spiritual source that they're drawing from. They have it, but they're ignoring it. They've moved away from their true selves, which is our spiritual reality. Think about all the truly beautiful things in life. They're all spiritual things: love and kindness and joy and compassion and mercy. All of these things lie in the love of God and spirituality. And when we look at this cold, harsh material reality, it looks so depressing, so scary. Let us move out of that harsh material reality into the spiritual reality, all of us, every day. And let us move together to do that. We Baha'is are blessed with, as Baha'u'llah said, an ocean of his words. He says, immerse yourself in the ocean of my words. And for those of you who aren't as familiar with the Baha'i faith, I would suggest try it, dip in the ocean. If your world isn't perfect, perhaps there might be something better for you. Because I can tell you that the world is a beautiful world. My world is a beautiful world. I'm not saying my world is perfect every day, but the world that I see is the inner world. And if we live in that inner world, there's a beautiful story in the Baha'i writings about an early Baha'i, and he was actually taken as a prisoner, dragged upside down, head first in the desert on a donkey, and he wouldn't stop singing. He was being beaten as he was being dragged on this donkey, and he never stopped singing. Then they put him in solitary confinement 23 hours a day, and he thanked God for the 24th hour. This is what we should all do. Our lives aren't going to be perfect. We'll have challenges. We'll have calamities. But Baha'u'llah says, my calamity is my providence. Outwardly is fire and vengeance, but inwardly it is light and mercy. Let us find the light and the mercy in all of our calamities, whether they be physical or material, and let us help others find that too. Our job is to find the light, to spread the light. The world needs it right now. It's a dark world right now. It's a scary world. To most people, they only see the dark and scary. I see the dark before the dawn. And it's really our worldview that matters. The more people that can see the light, the more people that can spread the light. And this light is spreading. It's all over the world. And it's not just among people who have acknowledged that Baha'u'llah is here. Baha'u'llah, the glory of God. It's people who are working in his light, not even knowing his name sometimes. This has been the pattern throughout history. When Buddha came, there were people spreading the light of Buddha who had never heard of him. There were people spreading the light of Muhammad when he came, of Jesus when he came, who had never heard his name. And there's people today spreading the light of Baha'u'llah, the teachings of Baha'u'llah, about the equality of women and men, the oneness of race, the oneness of nation, that have no idea that these are teachings of Baha'u'llah. The most important thing is to spread this teaching of the oneness of humanity and the need for spirituality in our lives. I can't tell you how many people I try to talk to about spirituality, and they think I'm crazy. They say, what are you talking about? Why are you talking about God? Why are you talking about religion? I don't want to know about religion. I was just told that by someone yesterday. I put out a beautiful post on Facebook. I thought it was beautiful anyway, about what Christian and Jewish and Muslim leaders said about Abdul-Baha the day of his funeral. They each talked about him as a prophet has died. 80 years he lived the life of a prophet. It talked about his love and kindness. It talked about how a great glory has departed the earth and how the whole earth was mourning. And these were Christian and Muslim and Jewish leaders, not Baha'i leaders, saying this about someone from another religion in 1921. And I said this to someone, and she said, you know, nobody cares about religion. Don't write about that. Well, I care about religion, and I care about God, and I care about spirituality, and I'm not going to stop writing about it. And other people can say we don't need that. Unfortunately, I look at the results of that. I look at the results of turning away from God. I look at the results of saying we don't need religion. And then I look at the world and I see the overdoses, and I see the overcrowded mental hospitals, and I see all of the drugs and the alcohol and all the things we're trying to do to save ourselves from what reality? From this absolutely beautiful, wonderful, splendid reality that we all live in. We need religion. We need the lessons of religion. We need religion as a uniting, not a divisive force. Now, I also agree with Abdul-Baha when he said if religion is a source of division and strife, it's better to get rid of that religion. But that's not religion. Abdul-Baha was very clear. He said, no, that's not really religion at all. He said it's superstition in the name of religion. We need to get rid of superstition and fundamentalism in the name of true religion. And we need to get back to the actual teachings of Christ, Jesus, of Muhammad, of Buddha, Krishna, of all the great Moses, of all the great religious leaders and prophets. We need to get back to true love and unity, universal love for humanity that all the messengers of God taught, and away from religion as a source of strife and conflict. The reason why religion becomes a source of strife and conflict is because it eventually disintegrates into just the outer forms of religion. And that's what divides us. My religion believes this, and your religion believes that. Instead of doing that, we need to investigate truth without prejudice, without our previous beliefs. What is true? When we investigate truth, we see that Moses was teaching the same thing as Jesus, in essence, as was Muhammad. When we investigate truth, we see this. It's only when we're stuck in our boxes that we put ourselves in. My family believed this, therefore I believe this. I believe this, therefore you're wrong and I'm right. Abdul-Baha said, when we argue about religion, we're both wrong. And I agree with that. It's time for us to stop arguing, and it's time for us to take this tool, the most powerful tool in the history of humanity, a tool which has created golden ages throughout the history of humanity. Every 500 to 1,000 years, there's another religious golden age. And we're coming into the greatest golden age of ever, the great Baha'i Commonwealth, which hasn't come to fruition yet, but a great worldwide society where we acknowledge our oneness, where it doesn't matter whether you were born in Nepal or England or Ethiopia. We're one. Of course we're one. Think about it for 2 seconds. How could we be anything else but that? We were born on the same earth. We breathe the same air. There are no borders between countries. That's an illusion. And this idea of different religions is only a tradition thing. I mean, I was born Jewish. Did that make me different than my friend who was born Christian? It's ridiculous to think so. And the whole idea of skin color, the tragic idea that someone's skin color, their hair, or something makes them somehow less or greater than anyone else, is simply wrong. We are one human family. We all have brains, we all have hearts, we all have souls, and we need to treat each other as such. And when one of our brothers or sisters has less than us, we need to come to their aid. That means if your skin color is a little different, you do not let that be a barrier to helping someone with a different skin color or a different religion or even different political views. We need to help each other. And when we help each other, we raise all of us up. So I think that's about 30 minutes. I want to really have a discussion. I like discussions. So if we could open it up to questions, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say.
Good morning, Steve. This is Lucy from Clearwater.
Hi, Lucy. Nice to see you, or not see. I don't know if your camera's on, but it's nice to hear you.
Likewise. I have a direct question that will directly, oh, sorry, I'm getting a pop-up. Oh, I don't have a camera. I'm sorry. So I have a direct question that would directly help me in my Baha'i ways or practices. So next Saturday, I am starting canvassing, and I have been studying nonstop. Yesterday, I did maybe 10 hours. I went through the Ruhi books, Kitabi Agdas. I did in English and Spanish simultaneously with group and individually. And above all, I've exhausted myself. And then the last thing I read was the hidden words, and where I got a beautiful confirmation. It said that God was happy. And so then I rested. What do you suggest I do before I knock on my first door?
Clone yourself. Lucy, you are a beautiful light. My actual suggestion is this. I think that you should always what I do is just ask Baha'u'llah for his help. say, Baha'u'llah, please put the right words in my mouth. And another thing is, God, can I do your will today and serve this faith? Can everything I do serve this faith? And really just say a little prayer. Whenever I'm ready to talk like this, I always say, Baha'u'llah, make it your words, better than mine. And Lucy, your words are wonderful. I think you just let it fly. I think you just be you. And you're a light, and your light will attract people. It already is. How many people are attracted to the faith already because of you, Lucy? I'd be curious.
Well, last night we had a few come over, my neighbor, my husband, my children, Veronica, random children at the park with children's classes. We've had 5 unknown souls every time. And then combined with other Baha'i kids, it's always been at least 13.
Yeah, you just keep doing what you're doing. Tell your husband I said hello. Tell your husband I said, hola, ¿cómo está?
I will. Gracias.
How's he doing? Is he a Baha'i yet?
He declared 50% Baha'i, 50% Catholic. I'm working on it.
Well, when you tell him that Catholic just means universal, he's a Baha'i all the way then.
I just don't want to say that, and it's organic. I don't want to push him, and he likes to investigate. Last night he learned about obligatory prayers and the short and the medium and the long one, and he was reciting them, and we were showing him pictures of what you have in your background from the Baha'i.org page. So I'm sorry, I'm hogging Steve. So please, whoever else wants to say anything.
Well, I agree with you. Don't push your husband. He'll come around. It sounds like he's already there.
He's there. He just doesn't want to say he's there.
Tell him I said hello.
Thank you, Steve.
Next question. Let's see. You can put questions in the chat or just raise your hand. Oh, here's one right here. Isn't it important to recognize this from Wade Francis as a process? Yes. I think that's definitely a process, and it's definitely something we work on every day. It just doesn't, you don't snap your fingers and say, hey, we're there. We don't wipe out racism in a day. We don't wipe out sexism in a day. These are things that have been in civilization for thousands of years. And the process, from a Baha'i perspective, is by doing the Institute process. So Lucy was mentioning the Rui books. So we're studying the Word of God. I think the most important thing is to get started today, and for each of us to do what we can to build this great civilization. And it is a process that happens day by day. And you have the disintegration and the integration happening side by side. Hopefully, Wade, that answers that question. Okay. Can you? Yeah, there you go.
May I jump in? Just real quick.
Absolutely.
Hey, it's nice good to see you, Steve.
Great to see you too.
What I'm getting at with this question is, as we have a society that's divided, and as we have contending peoples and people walking in delusion, there are people who see different pieces of the elephant. There are those who recognize, for example, that the calls for open borders today can be counterproductive. In other words, my point here is Abdul Baha, in outlining a process in The Secret of Divine Civilization, emphasizes that the first step is to firmly fix the borders of every nation. And it's absolutely true that at some point in the future, the borders will be no longer necessary, but the divine physician seems to indicate that at this particular stage in humanity's development, the borders are important. So when Baha'is perhaps oversimplify the golden age, which is yet perhaps hundreds of years in the future, and call for that golden age or policies to be implemented today, there are those who rightfully say, wait a minute, I disagree with that. So that's why I'm just saying, shouldn't we be perhaps cautious on this point?
Yes, and when I said that borders are illusory, I didn't mean that we shouldn't have borders. What I meant is actually in our minds to think that a Mexican, for example, is one iota less in any way than an American, than someone from the United States, or vice versa. That the border is not a physical thing. It's something that we've made. And to your point, there's systems around those borders which need to be preserved and need to be honored. You know, you have to have the systems in there. In the future, those systems may change, as you said, and that is the distant future. What I'm talking about is the borders we put in our minds. And that needs to be eradicated right away. That idea that the patriotism over being a world citizen, that part we can start working on right now. Practically saying, you know, I'm no better than anyone from any other country, no worse. We're all citizens of the world. And that's really where I was going, if it makes sense. But practically,
it does. I'm just emphasizing that, for example, when Abdul Baha would call for borders, we shouldn't assume that he's a xenophobe or a racist, and nor should we assume that others who might call for borders would be xenophobes and racists.
I fully agree with you, and I think your point is well taken. And I agree with you. We need borders in that respect. So in one respect, and that also talks about duality. There's a lot of duality in the world where there's two ways to look at something. So from a superiority thing, it's like men and women, for example. Men and women are equal in the Baha'i faith, but that doesn't mean there's not differences between men and women. And that same token. So there are some countries who are trying to eradicate all differences between men and women and say there's no such thing as a man and no such thing as a woman. And that's not true either. There are differences between men and women. What we want to eradicate is the differences in rights and respect between men and women, that men should no longer be dominant in our world. But yet we should acknowledge that we're different. And the same thing with the borders that you're talking about, Wade. We can't eradicate the borders. And I think also more importantly, your point is actually more important than that. When people have two different points of view and you have one group saying this and one group saying that, listen to the other group and don't automatically think they're wrong. The need for a border is very important. The need for border security is important. Yet, on the other hand, the need for treating people who are from the other side of the border with respect and humanity and decency is also very important. I see Ralph.
Well, I just want to make one final comment. That to me is exactly the point. They may in fact be wrong, but that doesn't mean they're evil. We shouldn't assume this negative motive behind their position. That is my primary point.
And they may in fact be different. They may be not even wrong. They have a different idea. And listen to their ideas, and maybe we incorporate each other's ideas rather than fight. Ralph, you've had your hand up forever, so I'd love to answer your question. Thanks, Wade.
From a Jewish background, you know who Martin Buber was, right? The I, thou, and the I, it. The I, thou can be spoken of a person's whole being. The I, it can't. There is an I, thou, and I, it relationship to the divine elixir. And you remember Bala said the vitality of man's belief in God is dying out in many lands. Now, 57 years ago, Altheiser and Hamilton come out with the God is Dead movement. And there was a Jewish guy that wrote a book. It's called Radical Theology Meets the Shoah. And you know what the Shoah was, right?
I do. My 20 members of my family died in the Holocaust.
Yeah, it's sad in a way. So in some ways, I went to school back during the late 60s, early 70s. And maybe, I don't know when, I know I've lived in Wade. I knew the church that he went to. I used to listen to him on radio, Herbert W. Armstrong. But I'd actually run into Hal Lindsey, and he might have been, I don't know, a little deeper in that apocalyptical idea than, Herbert W. Armstrong was. When I was younger, I read about Phineas Gage. You know who he was?
Mm-hmm. I think I've heard of Phineas Gage.
Yeah. My tablet is being kind of a problem. Now, Phineas Gage, actually had this accident 4 years after the Baha'i made his declaration. He had a lobotomy because he didn't watch what he's doing.
Yes, I remember that. I'm looking it up right now. Yes, I remember that. I
was an atheist when I read that. But when I read Hal Lindsey's Late Great Planet Earth, the Antichrist is supposed to sustain a fatal head wound and survive from it. And he's supposed to make Hitler look like Adolf Hitler as innocent as Mary's little lamb. So I brought this up. Now, there's something else too. There's a Baha'i friend in Australia, and he's going to do a Zoom meeting. His name is Farbin Delary. And he was persecuted in Iran. I think it was originally Zoroastrian. He went to India as a Parsi, and now he's in Australia. But he has stage 4 colon cancer. And I did post his book, as I think not. I think Wade did comment on it. And I do recognize Sharon here, because when I did the Zoom meeting, it was 4 o'clock here in the morning and 7 o'clock there in Australia. But I'm still thinking part of our problem is differences in these religions, because supposedly the Jews rejected Christ, but I heard the Jews rejected Zoroaster first because he's preaching dualism.
Well, the idea is not whether the Jews rejected Christ or whether the Christians rejected Muhammad, or it's really stepping away from that. And this actually gets into where Sue Emmel said, she asked, I think it was Sue who asked that, how do we talk to a Christian and say, we're not rejecting Jesus by being a Baha'i. And this idea of rejecting is interesting. I think what we probably need to do is meet people where they're at. And instead of saying Jews are rejecting Christ, anytime you put someone on the defensive, that's a problem. So because I was raised Jewish, and of course I rejected Christ. But why did I reject Christ? I rejected Christ because I was taught to reject Christ. It wasn't something evil on my part. I was just repeating what had been done for generations, and I inherited that rejection. And the way to get someone out of that rejection is not to say, oh my God, you're a terrible person, you hate Christ. Well, that probably wouldn't have gotten me on your good side when I was Jewish. Instead, attract people with the positives. Attract people and saying, well, there's a religion that believes this, this, and this, and this. And do you believe in the oneness of humanity? Do you believe that, do you love Christians? And of course I did, even though I, quote unquote, rejected Christ. I love Christians. In fact, at the time I was married, and still I'm married to a Christian. So the question is, how do you get people to be comfortable? Is you do what Abdul Baha did, which is you always talk about the positive. Abdul Baha would never come to someone and say, you're wrong, I hate you, you did this. He was very, very rarely accusatory to anyone. There was a great story about Abdul Baha, where the son of one of the people that had tortured him, the Shah, who had tortured his family, came to visit him in Europe, and Abdul Baha was gracious and kind to the point where the poor man cried and asked for his forgiveness. I think we should follow that example and talk about the beautiful, positive things of the Baha'i faith and the oneness of humanity. And eventually, if someone is lucky like I am, and I was lucky enough to be able to take the time and consider my own beliefs and say, well, why do I believe this? But it has to come from me, not from an external source, in my opinion. Or it has to come from that Christian person who's currently says, well, Jesus is the only way. What I like to say to them is, well, I agree with that. You start with agreeing. I agree. Jesus is the way, the life, the truth. The Bible says that. And then Krishna also said he was the way. And Buddha said he was the way. And Muhammad said he was the straight path. And the Bab said he was the way. And so who is the way? Is it Jesus? Is it Krishna? Is it Buddha? Or perhaps they're all the way. What do you think? And get them to thinking. So I didn't say they were wrong. I said they were right. And have you considered this? That's what Abdul Baha would always say. Ralph, did you have another comment on that?
Have you heard of a church called the Church of Almighty God?
I have not.
It's a church out of China. It has, you ever heard of the female Jesus? Is there such a thing as I'm actually, if you look at my website, you'll find a girl on there. And it does go back to the Matthew 24, that lightning comes out of the east. There's a Chinese woman, her name is Lightning. And this church was established in 1991, but they're considered a dangerous cult in China. I actually have one for a friend. And I've also heard this happen before here in New York State, that there was a woman that professed to be the return of Jesus Christ. And she was listening to an Indian saying one of the biblical passages in his own language. And she asked him, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, if you're Jesus Christ, you know what I'm talking about. So I believe the Mormon writing said, well, there's no way that the Son of Man can be a woman. This happened in New York State. I've lived in New York State, but I never knew anything about 1844 because, you know, Eileen Maddox had that book about 1844. She picked up where William Sears left off.
Well, let me address real quickly the woman, the first woman you talked about lightning, and so I'll just tell you a quick story. I was in the Parliament of the World Religions a few years ago, and there was somebody, there's a booth called the Maitreya Buddha, and they said, he's the return of Christ, he's the Maitreya Buddha. I said, this guy, where is he? Well, he was in South America somewhere. I said, can I talk to him? No one could talk to him. I said, well, that's not possible. Baha'u'llah says he is all of those things. And Baha'u'llah said there's only one. He said, anyone who's claiming that is a lying imposter. I said, so either Baha'u'llah's wrong or your guy's wrong. I'm perfectly happy to investigate your person, the Maitreya Buddha. And I said, how can I investigate? Please, tell me. And I said, if this is a better solution than what Baha'u'llah's offering, great, I'll follow it. And so the person at the booth said, in 3 years, and mind you, this was 2018, so it's already passed. In 3 years, he's going to take over everyone's mind for like 30 seconds, I think. And everyone after that will be a Maitreya Buddhite or whatever they call themselves. And I said, great, well, I'll be a happy Baha'i until that time. And so, I'm perfectly happy to see what lightning has to say, but unless it's better than what Baha'u'llah has to say, I'll remain a happy Baha'i. And I do believe that, Baha'u'llah's teachings are, that's really what I'm here to talk about, are incredible. And, I've dedicated my life, practically the last decade of my life, to taking these teachings, and actually, Sue had actually put something in chat about one of them, which is about Indigenous people, and I'll comment on that shortly. These teachings from Baha'u'llah are so incredible. This idea of the oneness of humanity, the idea of the equality of women and men, the idea of the harmony of religion and science, the idea that this is really one religion, and that Christianity and Judaism and Buddhism and all the previous faiths, Islam, are chapters in that faith, are so astounding, so amazing, that we could spend the rest of our lives just discussing them. And I don't really have a huge desire to talk about other people making the claim until we've exhausted the possibility of putting out these ideas and really getting them out into the world from Baha'u'llah. I was going to talk, Sue, before I talk about the Indigenous people, Jamie, if you're still there, I want to just give you a shout out. The work that Jamie's doing with her schools, her Baha'i schools, is an incredible example of that, about the material and spiritual education of humanity. And she's doing it right there in Tampa. And I just want to say that, and I'm so happy. Yeah, so happy to support the work that Jamie's doing, Jamie and her team is doing there. This is what we need to be doing, I think, is really not arguing about whether Baha'u'llah is the promised one, but taking the promise and bringing it to humanity. And humanity without this is dying. Moving on to the point about Indigenous people, I had the pleasure and the sadness, actually, of being at the memorial for Kevin Locke last night, the great Indigenous Baha'i. I had the incredible pleasure of visiting his house shortly before he died and being interviewed by him just days before he died. And for those of you who don't know Kevin Locke, he was an amazing Lakota Baha'i. And if anyone had any doubts about the Baha'i writings, what they say about the Indigenous people rising up and being a great force for humanity, to really save humanity, they just had to meet Kevin Locke. The comments about Kevin and his dedication to the faith and his incredible knowledge of the faith and just who he was as a human being, it went on for hours last night. That's why I'm even a little bit tired this morning, because I didn't get home till late last night. And we could have probably stayed all night talking about Kevin. But moreover, in general, I've had the pleasure of working with Indigenous people, and it is an absolute I'm absolutely amazed. I guess what I went to Native American reservations last summer, and my observation was this: that there's always these talks in history, and you see it in the movies about the savages, coming upon the savages, and the civilized people coming upon the savages. And I think that might have been true, except we had the wrong people labeled as savages. There's an incredible Native American spirituality and history, and I think it's really very much in line with the Baha'i faith. And I think that's one reason why you're going to see a mass adoption of the Baha'i faith. Now, the Native American population, has a lot of problems with drugs and alcohol and the trauma that has been imposed upon Native Americans in this country. But I do see Native Americans having this beautiful core spirituality that eventually they'll embrace along with the Baha'i faith, and they will rise up and be an incredible force for good in this country and all over the world. Sharon, you had a question or a comment?
Yes, very timely. I'm tangata whenua, Māori from New Zealand, Aotearoa, New Zealand. And what I want to say to you is that this is me looking at the census of your population. Now, these may not be perfect stats. 175,000 to date, non-Native American population. And I think that it was 220,000 different tribal representation who are declared Baha'is. And why I'm saying this is because from the grassroots where I am, I go between, we have a mandate in our country from the Blessed Guardian about First Nations people. What I'm trying to say is that Aboriginal Australians, tangata whenua, and Native Americans, the movement in the last decade is considerably increasing. And I get so very excited because I'm like a one voice out there trying to engage. I have a great affection I have learnt to really love the American Baha'i community because I know what its destiny is. I believe Abdu'l-Baha knew that as well. That's why you guys have been designated inheritors of the Dawnbreakers. And not for, games. It's a reality. But what is happening is that I pray to God, like people from this country, every Indigenous month celebration, go to the Seminole Reserve in Florida, and they exchange. But in that exchange, they're finding out and reuniting, according to Apache prophecy, the 4 stones, they're finding together, invisibly almost, their connectedness. Now, what we need then is what you're doing and what other people are doing, is that all those stones need to really be aware, because the infusion of grace at this point in time, this day, right now, cannot be repeated. So grasp it. So I just wanted to, I'm very wordy. I go to a lot of things. I've adopted the Clearwater Baha'is because you have some wonderful believers there that have actually enabled me to reach out to reserves and, virtually. So look, I just want to say, please be aware, there's movement, there's a lot of movement, and you can, in whichever way, become involved, because what's going to happen, Abdu'l-Baha's prophecies are there for all of us to see and to understand. And he has told us what this is. And the greatness of America, all that assistance and the dispersion of all the negativity is about this grassroots movement, and the focus of Baha'is on that can mitigate your partisan politics, drug abuse, the whole thing, because what that does is imbibe spiritual health to enable the lesser plan of God, that's us, to move. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alalpa, Sharon. I love your light too. I don't know if we bottled up you and Lucy, I think it might actually cause a nuclear explosion between the two of you.
That's funny, Steve. I will interject a small comment.
We can't do that. We can't do that without our American Baha'i whānau, because your designation is key to enabling all of that. And you need to jump on board with that. You need to put your ears to the ground and ride it. Please do that, because, you know, our whole world is looking at the American Baha'i community and what it's facing. And it's key to this movement forward. Bless you all, my American whānau. Ya Baholab Pa.
Ya Bahala Pa, Sharon. Lucy, you were going to say?
Yes, just so everyone is aware, I come from the South American Indian culture of the Amazon rainforest of the border of Colombia with Brazil. So without crying, I will say it very proudly. Born and raised in America, raised as a North American, but never let go of my roots. So Sharon, in honor of those that have passed in my family, I have always sent my mother down to the rainforest at least once a year. We send care packages, food, clothing, medicine, things that are very near and dear to them that are very hard to get in the Amazon rainforest. You'd have to travel by foot, by mountain, by canoe, down river to the most local village just to reach, and then hope and pray that your canoe doesn't flip over with all your things in the bottom of the river. So yes, this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. My mother has translated the Bible into her native tongue. That was something she was very proud of doing. She's written a book. It's called Child of Light. Her name's Filomena Romero. And I am trying to launch a website for my mother currently, so that she can talk about it and we can have podcasts on there or blogs, videos, pictures of what it's like to live out there and also be connected with God in a way where you're not excluded from his writings. So that's another project I've been working on.
Lucy, we'll talk privately about that project, okay?
Sure. I just wanted to share.
That sounds like a really cool one. Gilbert, I know the very well known and respected Gilbert Hakim has a
Good morning. This is Gilbert. I just wanted to mention your assumption is that Christians know Christ or Christianity. I don't think the assumption that people that claim to be Christian know Christianity is not exactly accurate. The problem we're facing is that the leaders of religion, if you look at Iran, the learned people are in charge of what other people think. So instead of them worshiping God, they're worshiping Jesus. So you need to first teach them Christianity, that the Christ came in to bring God into everybody's basically life. Not Christ, you need to love Christ, but you need to worship God. And the second area, which obviously Baha'u'llah abolished the station of learned people or clergy. And this needs to be taught to Christians as well, that they need to think for themselves. Excuse me.
I think that exactly right, Gilbert. The question is, what's the doorway in? So the doorway in has to be loving, and like Abdul Baha has to be loving and kind. So I'll give you a little story. I met a Christian woman about almost 10 years ago now, and met her in the airport. And first thing she said is I love Jesus. And I said, I love Jesus too. And we had this amazing conversation. And she now loves the Baha'i faith. She's not a Baha'i, but she loves the Baha'i faith, and probably will become a Baha'i, I would guess someday. But she's read the writings, but the doorway in was her love for Jesus. And so I think instead of saying you're wrong to love Jesus, say you're right to love Jesus, and I share that love. And then what I love to do is talk to Christians. My son's actually a Christian, and he's in a Christian fraternity, and I have these great conversations with these young men about loving Jesus. And I usually don't even leave that. I think it takes a little while, and once they understand you're a lover of Jesus, and then they say, well, what is this Baha'i thing? Then they have a doorway in. We just need to give them a doorway in. And I think that, what we don't want to do is create a greater barrier. And sometimes when you go and say, well, you're wrong for worshiping Jesus, if you start out with that, again, that might scare someone off. And the last thing I want to do is scare them off. Wade, you had your hand up again.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to sort of add to that. And as some here know, I'm a former Christian minister, and I always very gratefully, whenever I present anything, share that there's no clergy in the Baha'i faith. I resigned from the ministry in 1995 for the reason that God helped me through his mercy to understand that that role was actually not helpful. That position was actually not helpful. And as I tried to do my job as a Christian minister, the better I did my job, the more people would insert me in between themselves and God because of that title, because of that role. And so it's a two-edged sword, right? But the comment I wanted to make in terms of building a bridge and not becoming an impediment, and Gilbert, I think your comment was spot on, right? The issue is that people don't know their own Bible. People are confused by the idea that Jesus is God, and they do worship Jesus. And that is a big problem. And so as Baha'is, in creating that bridge, we must be careful not coming across as though we have that same problem of worshiping Baha'u'llah rather than God. God is one, and all the religions are one because all the religions are subservient to God. And one more point around the, Jesus being the only way. At every step in the unfolding of the divine plan and progressive revelation, the next manifestation, the one who is the manifestation for that day, must absolutely be accepted in order to move forward. And Baha'u'llah says that if you reject him, you've rejected all that went before. If you reject any one of them, you've rejected all of them. So Baha'is don't need to shy away from Jesus' claim of exclusivity because he was the manifestation for that day, and he was the only path forward for the Jewish people at that time in history. We sometimes sort of lose that overview and the dimension of time and how it plays out on the human plane in human existence and in the progression of divine civilization.
Yes, Andy has a question. Thank you, Wade.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much, Wade, for this. My way of handling this as somebody who had accepted Jesus Christ as his personal savior in the 1970s and soon afterwards accepted Baha'u'llah is to say this. If somebody about Jesus's exclusivity, I would say, yes, I desire in my life only what Jesus desires. And my idea, of course, of what it is that Jesus desires is not limited to the quasi-literal interpretation of the Bible that was current amongst the people that I knew back then. If I only want what Jesus wants, then I accept him and all the other manifestations of God and Baha'u'llah, just as you mentioned there, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just meet them at their love of Jesus, like you said, Andy and Wade. And I think that when it's Abdul Baha talked about this. He talked about it in some answered questions. He talked about how you could not love the manifestation because you didn't recognize the manifestation, but you could love what they stood for. And he said the blasphemy that was unforgivable was hating love itself. So you could even say something bad about Baha'u'llah and be forgiven for that because you didn't know who Baha'u'llah was. And I think we just need to have that open and loving doorway to Christians to understand that Baha'u'llah is indeed the return of Christ, that he is Jesus and that Jesus is Baha'u'llah. And not that Jesus is negative anyway, because how could you hate Jesus if you love Baha'u'llah? And I think Christians are defensive sometimes of Jesus, and we should embrace that defense. And because sometimes there's a double-edged sword, embrace that defense and say, look, I love that you love Jesus and you're defending Jesus. You don't have to defend Jesus from me because I'm not attacking Jesus and I'm not attacking you. You can put your defense down now. Jamie, you had your hand up, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that was just a thumbs up.
Oh, thumbs up. Okay. I missed that one. Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Hi, can you hear me fine? Oh,
Mhm.
you can't see me. Can you see me as well?
Yes.
All right, beautiful. So I have a question for you about this idea that we have as a society that, again, you've brought amazing points here today about this finding unity and growing together, this big central theme of growing together and finding unity. And clearly, outside us, this conversation and really in the mainstream, you have a lot of finding differences that people have engaging in. They've been engaging in it, be it at a small level or the role models that we have in society, finding differences and focusing on them. My question to you, it's with this backdrop, we have clearly a sad situation where you go to school. I went to school in the American system, and you're taught that from the beginning, religion is at odds with science. Scientists are persecuted because they are, again, bringing reason, and religion, unreasonable beliefs, are stopping this growth, this progress of reason. So therefore, the Renaissance is viewed as an enlightenment where scientists and the world broke away from religion. And you find throughout history, although we've had great, brilliant minds that were very religious, that were the same scientists that, again, where they're saying they're not being persecuted, were themselves religious, you still have this break apart in terms of the story of humanity, that science is at odds with religion. And ultimately speaking, we have this environment where it's no longer a matter of freedom of religion. The conversation has increasingly been about freedom from religion. And I really resonated with the point you said, that true religion is absent. That really resonated with me. And the question that I have for you is this: how can, in your opinion, we start conversations where we don't go through a matter of definitions for, I would feel, an inordinate amount of time? How can we get straight to the meat and butter, talking about how true religion is absent and we need to start focusing on that, and stop, listening to these people that are telling us all these lies? How do we get straight to that, to this true religion, bringing out these true thoughts, these true feelings that are really not shackled by all these prejudices? How do we do that, in your opinion?
Whenever you go to a Baha'i temple, there's 9 doorways. And whenever you go and meet someone new, there's a new doorway. And we have to know what their doorway is. And for one person, it could be a discussion about science. And for another person, it could be a discussion about religion. Yesterday, I'll give you an example. I was at a restaurant, and the cashier was a young woman that I talked to before, and she knew I owned the theater across the street. And I said, I want to know if anyone likes Cocaine Bear. Did you like it? And she said, I loved it. Why did you love it? I said, because she said that, well, they didn't take it too seriously. They knew it was stupid, and the people who made, and not to say I'm going to go see Cocaine Bear, because I'm just not going to waste my time or my soul that way. I feel like a part of my soul would disappear if I walked in the theater, but just by the name. But anyway, she said, I like horror movies. And so my next question was, what makes you happy? And she said, I forget what she said, but then we started having this conversation, and I said, well, do you think spiritual things are more important than material things? And she said, well, I really like spirituality. And we started having a whole different conversation. So it started off with Cocaine Bear, which you would never think would lead to this conversation. But the doorway there is to understand, where things were going and what was important. And most people, when you start asking questions, I like the Socratic method of talking to people. What do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And I always try to bring it around to spirituality. I don't think we want to talk about the negative. Occasionally I will. I'll say I don't want to talk about it. Like I say I don't like this movie, like I just mentioned, I don't like John Wick because it's so violent. So occasionally I'll say this is something I don't like. But for the most part, I like to stick to what we like. And more importantly, not what I like, but what do you like if I'm talking to you? And then go to those things. So in other words, I don't really need to say what's wrong with that religion or that, or, first of all, in my opinion, there's a lot right with all the religions. Wade was a pastor, and I'm sure if you asked Wade today, he wouldn't tell you that everything he thought as a pastor was wrong. Probably he would say most of it was right. Would you say that, Wade?
There was a lot that was right. And to quickly answer, what we had in our particular group was a tremendous respect for Moses. For that, we were denigrated by a lot of Christianity who kind of tended to reject Moses. But for me, that was the bridge that helped me become a Baha'i. And so, yes, there's much that I treasure from my former religious association.
And so if we dismiss Wade because he's a Christian, he's all wrong, that, as Wade said, makes us kind of, as Baha'is, the same thing. I don't think that everyone's all wrong if they disagree in some way. I think that we should probably find out what they think. And to his point, our point earlier from our discussion is we can have different sides of a discussion, and both could be partially right, or both could have ideas that are good. And so I think that it's very important to go in with a very positive attitude and ask a lot of questions, and then sometimes lead the conversation into this more spiritual path. That's the other thing is I tend to try to move conversations into people who know me. I know I always take it around to the Baha'i faith. It's just a question of how I'm going to get there.
And that's beautiful. This element that you're bringing in of Socratic thought, of using the Socratic method of asking someone what they think and learning with them by asking them questions and caring about what they have to say, and not simply what you care about and just, again, a monologue of what you are, what you care about, and what they should know. So that's actually a very, very good idea here that a lot of people, I feel, especially in modern society, we don't get taught, at least not in my education, sadly, but we don't generally get taught about the Socratic method. This is something I feel that only gets left to epistemology, or maybe history class where a historian teacher may decide that they love Socrates, so they're going to bring in a Socratic method and talk about it. And maybe in law school, they'll use that method if they still care to use it, which many don't anymore. So this idea of the Socratic method, and not, again, this rote memorization of forcing it on you, you memorize, you take a test on it, but this idea of having you walk through the pathway and arrive at the answer yourself, and using the Socratic method to get there. It's a very, very amazing tool that hopefully everyone watching here today, they can take notes on, and they can look it up. What is the Socratic method? What did Socrates do? How did it benefit society to use that method as a pedagogical tool to help people learn? So I wanted to thank you for saying that.
You're welcome. And I wanted to point out something actually from Sue Emmel again. She had put in the chat about Ancient Cedars, which is Mary's Baha'i meeting today, Native American. Mary is an incredibly passionate Indigenous Baha'i, and she has a thing at 5 p.m. Eastern time today. Called Ancient Cedars, and Sue has put the link into the Zoom.
Does that happen regularly, or is it a one-off?
Once a month. Actually, if you look at the link in the Zoom, I'll just read it. Speaking of Native American Zooms, the monthly Ancient Cedars Indigenous Baha'i ceremony is at 5 p.m. Eastern today, and then the link is right there.
Okay, beautiful. So if we visit www.ancientcedars.org/ceremony, we should be able to get there. I'm reading it out loud, so people on YouTube and Facebook could use it as well.
Anyone else have any questions or thoughts? I know we've been going on for over an hour now, so maybe people are getting tired.
Yes, we're getting close to definitely ending for today. There was a question on Facebook from a Miss Veronica Borchi. She asked it at 11:44, so that's about half an hour ago. She asked us this question: should we be aware of the threats around us whilst being fully immersed in service for humanity? For example, poisoning of food for profit, for power, poisoning the air, water, etc. Should we be aware of the smoke screen or just ignore it? And then she said, I think he's kind of answering it right now. But just as a rehash from that, because maybe we're looking in one way. Sorry.
I think my answer to that is that yes, to be aware of the threat, but not to be immersed in the mud. So the danger is that we can think of everything as a threat. And this is where partisan politics gets you, because they'll talk about the threat of the other, and also with racism and sexism, the threat of empowered women like Jamie. Oh my God, this woman, don't give her any power. She'll educate our young and raise up our society. But, what people say is this, and this, which is negative. And be aware of that threat. So if we look at that threat to the point where we become materially involved in division and divisiveness, then that's a problem. But if we look at the threat and say the threat is racism, okay, we have a problem with it. Depends what we think the threat is. If the threat is the material problems of the world today and dealing with the material problems of the world today, yes, we should look at that. If the threat is something imagined, like political partisanship or something along those lines, or don't let this person get any power because, then that's probably not a threat we want. we should probably ignore that.
That's very valuable. Thank you for explaining that, because again, a lot of people, we're just touching the basis, and a lot of people, like the elephant in the room, and you don't see what the elephant looks like. We're all touching a part of the elephant. It's all a part of the same elephant. We just don't know it yet because we can't see it with our own eyes. We can just feel it with our fingers. So it's a good idea, just talking about it. But I do have one last point before we go for today. There's this analogy you made me think of, or I'm sorry if I'm using the wrong name, maybe a metaphor. Baha'u'llah uses that our soul is like a bird that it flies in the sky, but then it has to go back to the earth to maintain its sustenance. And sometimes the earth gets on its wings so much so that it can't fly anymore. And this, I'm going to call it analogy / metaphor because of my uneducatedness on this. I'm sorry, but you just got me thinking about that, about this relationship we have with the world, that we have to constantly be just vigilant, thinking not just of the positive ways we can improve our society and serve, but also constantly going back to the holy writings and cleansing our hearts, purifying our minds, rejuvenating our spirits. Because as we continue to go back into the world and do something, be it just to survive, we have this ever needed work that we have to do to continually care for our spirits, to lift our spirits and not just be pulled down by the weight of the world around us, and to always focus on what we need to do next rather than what's wrong. And I thought that was a very good keystone for the talk today, this idea that you brought up about focusing on the positives, about going, when we're speaking with people, to what they think and not necessarily just telling them what we think they should know. Lucy, this would be the last question for today, Lucy, for everybody, I mean. Please, Lucy, ask your question.
So just very briefly, just on John's topic yesterday, and I'm glad I studied yesterday because I have a very short answer. Fine, I'll turn on the camera, guys. I'm in my weekend attire here, so excuse me if I look messy. Hello. So in page 35 of book 1, section 6, I personally labeled it persevering the soul. So basically, It says, "Know thou that the soul of man is exalted above and is independent of all infirmities of body or mind. That a sick person shows signs of weakness is due to the hindrances that interpose themselves between his soul and his body. For the soul itself remaineth unaffected by any bodily ailments. Consider the light of the lamp. Through an external object may interfere with its radiance, the light itself continueth to shine with undiminished power. In like manner, every malady afflicting the body of man is an impediment that preserveth the soul from manifesting its inherent might and power. When illness leaves the body, however, the soul will evince such ascendancy and reveal such influence as no force on earth can equal. Every pure, every refined and sanctified soul will be endowed with tremendous power and shall rejoice with exceeding gladness." I just wanted to share that today. It's found on page 35 of book 1 in the Ruhi Institute if anybody's interested. You can go to the Ruhi website, which was also founded in Colombia. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. I've been studying Rui. I have about every week we have, I think, 10 different Rui groups going. So I've read that very, very many times, and it's never gets old to me to just think about the soul and how the soul soars and how much the soul is separate from the body, in the sense that when we have infirmities, the soul can still soar. When there are, and again, to my point earlier, when there are things in this physical world that may seem to bother us, we need to get outside those things and lean into our spiritual reality. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone who's joined us here today. It has been a very scintillating discussion, having the members here who join us on Zoom.
Would you please repeat the address for today at 5 o'clock for Native Americans?
Good question. Yes, I will reread that right now. It is www.ancient-cedars. So the word cedar is spelled CEDARS.org/ceremony. ancient-cedars.org/ceremony.
Thank you.
Sure thing. And for everyone who's needing that, happy to repeat it. And hopefully Jeremiah can put it in the comments, since it was something that was spoken of today. Please copy it.
We'll add it to the description of the video. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead and continue to close out, John.
Yes. So we thank you all for joining us here today on this beautiful Sunday, on this first session after we just celebrated Nowruz, the new year, the Baha'i New Year, the first day of spring. For all of you who are just joining us, we welcome you to check out this video on the Clearwater Baha'is YouTube channel or on the Facebook page for the Baha'i Center of Clearwater. And you can find all of this by going to www.clearwaterbaha'is.org. You are more than welcome to look at all the videos from the different speakers that we've had that have come on over the past 2 years, different meetings of the minds. We are very happy to help you. If you just want to ask questions, you can send us a contact request and we'd be happy to get you in touch with the speaker that you're interested to ask questions from. With that being said, we hope you have a wonderful week ahead, a beautiful Sunday, and hopefully this is another uplifting moment in your life. Best wishes, everyone.
Thank you and happy Nowruz. Thank you.